Thank you everyone for joining us today. It is episode 3. Thank God we've made it to the third one. Um, so far so good. But on today's episode, we have John Holland. Welcome to today's episode. He just launched a Kickstarter, correct, for Akemi? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Akemi, but it's actually a Fund My Comic. It's not a Kickstarter.
Okay, okay, all
We
right. So
Fund
it's
My
a
Comic. I've
crowdfunding
done
campaign, right?
Kickstarter, and I've got a couple months. I've got another Kickstarter starting, but I'm trying to do some of these. I've got a Zoom starting in another month too, so I'm trying to check out some of these other crowdfunding sites and see how they do.
Okay, yeah, and it's funny because up until going over your materials that you sent me, I didn't really know that there was more than just Kickstarter, especially for, you know, projects and indie creators. And then I'm seeing Zoop and the Fund My Comics page. So I definitely want to kind of look at these, but you know, so because I got a couple projects coming out and I like to give advice to other creators too, but I definitely want to take a look at those other platforms too because they do sound interesting. But enough of that. Tell us, give us a little bit about yourself and let let all the viewers know who you are and what you got going on.
Well, I've been writing comics for a long time. I'm old. uh, I mean, I first started getting published back in the '90s through Fantagraphics.
Okay.
I did work with Fantagraphics and Innovation. I did like they were adapting the Quantum Leap TV show at the time, the original
Yeah.
one. I did
Uh-huh.
their Christmas issue of Quantum Leap. I've
Okay.
worked for Caliber. I've worked for Malibu.
Nice.
Probably about a dozen different small publishers, back from the '90s. I
Mm-hmm.
actually self-published my first comic towards the end of the '90s, Diebold, which is actually
Okay.
where I got the title from my publishing company, Diebold Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we did two issues of it back in the late '90s, and we kind of, life just took over, and we kind of, didn't work on it anymore. First issue of it, actually, considering we weren't in Diamond distributor, and there wasn't a lot of, there was no crowdfunding sites or anything. We actually did
Mm-hmm.
about 3,000 copies of the first issue, so we did pretty well. And then, for what it was, and then I kind of took a break from comics, and I've got back in and been working. Did some work with Antarctica. It's
Okay.
Alive Comics. I just signed a contract with Source Point Press,
All right.
uh,
Nice.
and I publish under Diebold Comics too. I have about somewhere between 25 and 30 comics. I've
Wow.
self-published under Diebold. Now, some of that is some of
Wow.
the older stuff that I had did back in the '90s. I've packaged it and put it out as like in the '90s. I did a series in Fantagraphics in their Critters anthology called Lizards,
Okay.
and I had enough to do 5 issues of that. By the
Oh
time I took
wow.
all those, and I've actually continued it, so we're on issue 6 of that right now.
Okay.
And then there's new stuff too. I did Alma, which is what if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother, which is
Okay.
I'm really bad about coming up with like the elevator pitch or the log
Yeah.
line, but that to me is the best elevator pitch or log line I've ever come up with. That's actually what I just signed Source Point Press with. We did one issue of it. Hernan Gonzalez is the artist. We did
Okay.
an issue of it, and we're going to do two more, and it's going to be like a trade. It'll be about 100 pages, and that's
Okay.
the book. Once we finish the last two issues, Source Point is going to publish that as a trade.
Nice.
Uh, yeah, I did
Nice.
titles. I did a history of voodoo. I did a book called Robot Sex, which is not X-rated, despite the title. uh, so I've got a lot of different books. I did we actually, this is going to be the book that we're going to do a Kickstarter on probably around March or April. 2 Tons of Fury, which
Okay.
stars well, actually, it stars a whole bunch of public domain characters, but the two main characters are Herbie the Fat Fury and
Okay.
Batman the Human Flying Saucer. Uh,
Okay.
as you can tell from those characters, it's not a very serious book. It's very,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very funny book, I think. So we did
Yeah.
one issue of that, and then we did an issue with Antarctica Press with Ben Dunn, where the two characters meet his character Tomorrow Girl.
Okay.
And then the one we're working on, the one that's going to come out in March or April, it's about half done right now. We want to make sure we're 100% done before we go crowdfunding with it. It's going to be
Okay.
2 Tons of Fury versus Cthulhu. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
going to be a very very unique take on Cthulhu.
Okay, that sounds like a very impressive catalog you have. You've got all these titles because I know with the you sent me some files and I seen a bunch of your the covers for the digital comics that you said you want to do a zoop for it. I'm like, wow, these
Yeah,
this
all
you
these I'm going
got
to
you got
do
a
Zoop
nice
for
catalog going on here.
as soon as Akemi finishes. Well, actually, I'm talking to Zoop right now, so we're not. We're just starting to get the. They've approved it, and then Zoop does most of the heavy lifting on their crowdfunders.
Okay.
So we're just starting to get into that part of it. So hopefully it'll take about a month, so that way Akemi will be over, and we'll go into that. And it's going to that crowdfunder is going to be no print, so it's all going to be
All
digital.
digital. Okay.
Because I've noticed on a lot of crowdfunders, digital sales seem to be creeping up, and
Yeah.
this
Mm-hmm.
way we can offer, the prices of the comics will be less than a printed, and
Mm-hmm.
you won't have to wait for me to, send it to the printer, get it back,
You
mail it
just
to you.
straight
You'll get it,
email it.
within, a day. I won't say an hour because it'll take me but hopefully you'll get within a day after
hmm
the project ends. So,
Yeah.
and that's going to have a lot of titles. And one title I forgot to mention that I'm really proud of, is A Girl and Her Dog. I don't know if you're
Yeah, I
familiar with
seen that. I
Tony
seen that
Isabella.
cover, and it's a very beautiful cover.
Yeah,
It's a very
it's
beautiful
kind of a
cover.
slice of life
Yeah.
between the girl and her dog. And Tony
hmm
Isabella, who created Black Lightning, the DC comic,
Yeah.
and he created I think Tigger and Misty
hmm
Knight for Marvel. When it came out, he called that one of the best comics of the year.
Nice.
So I was very very proud of that book. It's not a it's not a it's not like a horror comic. It's not a superhero comic. It's more of a slice of life.
Okay.
Uh, but it kind of shows this dog and the girls their relationship. Even after the dog dies, the dog kind of comes back whenever she needs just to see the dog.
All
And
right.
it's a very it's one of those stories I say it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, but in the end hopefully it's an uplifting message at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds different compared to, what a lot of, projects are. You usually have your good versus evil, your superhero, supervillain kind of deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, that definitely sounds like something amazing, and I definitely can't wait to check that out. But your new project that you just launched, your for your crowdfunding, Akemi. Let's talk a little bit about that because I know you got that launched, and we want to get that
Oh
word
yeah,
out. And
I'm kind of freaking out because nobody's don't backed it yet, but it's still
Mhm.
early and it's a
Yeah,
Wednesday, so it probably
yeah.
won't get a lot of traction till tonight, when people get off work and stuff. But
hmm
looking at it and seeing a zero there, it's kind of like I'm going like, oh, I gotta, I've spent most of the morning like on Facebook, just going through every Facebook group I can find, and
Yeah.
I've been all over the internet this more, up until almost now, just getting the word out, pushing it. So we'll see. Hopefully, I'm only asking for 1,000, which will help pay, where I can pay Jorge the artist on it.
Yeah.
It won't be coming out of my pocket because
Yeah.
I've got a limited amount of funds. It'd be nice if I can at least pay because we've already got the second issue written, or I'm almost got it written, and he's going to start drawing it. The plan is to have the second issue done by the time the first issue is crowdfunded or very close
Okay.
after, so we can go right into the second issue crowdfunding for it. So, there
Okay.
won't be that, late. And then, if that works out and we're making money, we're going to do a 3 and 4 too. I want to do at least
Okay.
4 issues, get those done, put those in a trade, and then, maybe take a month or two break and then come back. I see Akemi as a long lasting title, as a regular, something going on.
hmm
But I think part of it is we have to be able to get it out on it can't take us like a year in between issues. People will
Yeah.
lose interest. So,
hmm
and Jorge is very fast. He,
Okay.
we just started this project probably at the end of Christmas, the end of last year, and he's already
hmm
done. He's finished with the first
Oh
issue.
wow.
That's why I'm
That's
thinking by
that's
the
a
time
quick turnaround.
he'll have the second issue done pretty quick too.
Nice.
Uh,
Nice.
so it's and Akemi is become a project that really at first I've had the first issue script is at least 6 months old, maybe longer. Sometime
Okay.
last year I wrote it, and I wrote it, and I was like, it's all right. I like it's I kind of it's kind of it was inspired. Let me put it this way: it was inspired by Ben Dunn's Warrior Nun from Antarctica Press.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I can
Because
see that.
Warrior Nun, I did some work with Ben, and Ben's a super nice guy, and War he sold Warrior Nun to the people that did the TV show. He can't do any more Warrior Nun because
Yeah.
uh, but I think his non-compete clause probably just came up because he was talking on Facebook about he'd like to do something similar to it. So I
Okay.
seen that, and and honestly, I've never read Warrior Nun. I've never seen the TV show, but the concept really intrigues me.
Hmm.
A fighting nun. I
Yeah.
remember a comic back in the '90s from Comico that was called Evangeline. There was
Hmm.
another fighting nun. This one
Okay.
was set more in the future, and it was by
Hmm.
Chuck Dixon and Judith Hunt. And I remember collecting that when it came out. So just because it's so the two ideas are just so far apart. So
Yeah.
I wrote up a script, and I had a friend, an artist that wanted was, he was like, "Oh yeah, let's do this and get it to Ben, and we'll." So I wrote up the script, and I actually talked to Ben at San Diego last year about it. So I know it's been since July. I think I wrote the script in June, and Ben liked it, but he was, not like, "Oh yeah, let's publish it." So I was like, "All right, that's cool." He told me, he said, "Well, go off and do a Kickstarter or something on it if you want
Hmm.
to."
Okay.
So and plus, like I said, it's not Warrior Nun. It's completely. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know if there's any similarities except for the fact that she's a female nun fighting, bad guys,
Yeah.
monsters and evils. Because like I said, I've never. Once I started it, I kind of didn't want to, read it because I didn't want to, take things from that, So if anything is similar to it, it's just by chance. But
Hmm.
so the artist I was originally talking to, he wasn't going to get to it. He just, there's a lot of things going on or whatever. So I finally decided, I want to put this out, So I was started looking for an artist, and I went on Facebook, and a lot of people hate Facebook, and there's a lot of good reason to hate Facebook.
Yeah. I
But
just got back on Facebook.
Facebook has been the best since the '90s. When I first started, I used to go through like Comic Buyer's Guide and advertise for artists, but
Yeah.
now I find all my artists on Facebook. I
Hmm.
go into those Facebook groups, like
Yeah.
connecting writers and artists and writers
Hmm.
looking for art. And I tell you, when I make a post, I get at least 100 people,
Oh yeah.
looking for it.
Easy.
And
Hmm.
and Jorge was one of the first people that answered my post. And at first I was like, well, let me keep looking because his style was, especially the artist that originally was going to do it, was more of a realistic,
Yeah.
kind of a Neil Adams type style. So in Jorge's style is more of a manga, cartoony type
Hmm.
style a little bit. And so I was kind of like, well, let me, keep looking. But then I kept going back to the art he showed me, and I kept going like, God, this guy's good. I said,
Yeah.
this is the artist I want for this book,
Mm. Yeah.
and I'm so glad because he has been like his art on this book is just so good. I mean, he gives such an expression and a emotion to the characters. It's just
Hmm.
I'm amazed by what he's doing. I'm in love with it. So I got with him, sent him the script. He liked it. Boom! Like I said, about a month later, the book was done.
Yeah. And from what I've seen for the files you sent me, this looks great. It
Thank
looks
you.
great, and I can't wait to dig into it. But yeah, I don't see any problem with you reaching your goal. This is
I hope
the
not.
artwork, just the
Yeah.
artwork alone is amazing,
Oh
and
yeah.
I
I
can't
think
wait to
that's
dig into it.
yeah, especially on a crowdfunder, you've got to have that artwork that's gonna, you can have a good idea, but they don't
It's the
see enough
artwork.
of it. That may
Hmm.
attract them, but if that artwork doesn't, reach
Yeah.
out, his
Hmm.
art is just like there's a scene, a page where Akemi's fighting, and it's just like just the movement. He creates such a movement with the characters
Hmm.
and everything. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I'm just in awe of his art. He is so good that
Hmm.
I if I could lock him up in a room and not have him work with anybody else but me, I would do it. But
Oh yeah. No, I could see it's I could see the flow between what you're putting out as the
yeah,
writer and his artwork. It's definitely a great collaboration,
yeah,
because you could have a great artist and a great writer, but
yeah. If they
sometimes
don't,
they
yeah,
don't,
yeah. I've
and
been in
and
that
it
situation where they don't mesh, and it's like
yeah,
no
no,
matter
this
what,
looks
it
like
just doesn't seem to, it's comes
hmm
out stilted or it doesn't
hmm
look right,
yeah,
But I've been lucky. I've worked with some really good artists, and it's one thing. I can say I found some really good artists, and knock on wood, I'm continuing that tradition. Hernan, who did Alma for me, Hernan's like
Mhm.
blowing up right now. He's doing work for IDW and a whole bunch of smaller. In fact, that's why Alma is kind of going to take a little while to get done because he has to finish up all his contract work before he can get back to it. But
Yeah.
his style is just is it's like everybody I've worked with has really been some really good artists, which I've been
Yeah,
lucky for.
that's what's up. That's great. Especially to find someone that complements your side of the project. Sometimes
Yeah,
especially like, you said you got a ton of um messages to your original advertising, and that one that just, oh man,
yeah.
it sticks out. And
Yeah, that's the one I
yeah.
kept coming back to, and it's just like I was like, this is just too good to. In fact, besides Akemi, we're starting on another project too. I did like a 6-page short story that we're hoping, I mean, I probably shouldn't even mention because it's probably jinx us, but we're hoping to sell it to like heavy metal or something.
Okay.
It's a little 6-page science fiction story.
All right.
He's finishing that up, and then he was like, he goes, this would make a really cool comic if you expand it
Hmm.
out. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, yeah. So we're actually going to we're going to try to sell the short story, and if it sells, even if it doesn't, we're going to expand it to maybe an ongoing, at least a one issue, maybe
Yeah.
2 or 3 issues.
Okay.
It's a science fiction story that's just like really over the top. It's got like
Nice.
everything in it. So and it just the stuff that's in it just it's like I wrote it for his art style, which I really didn't because I wrote it before I even knew him. But for
Mhm.
with his style, it's just working out really good.
Nice. Yeah, that's what's up, man. I can't wait. I can't wait to dig into it. Like I said, I also can't wait for to see how the crowdfunding goes, which kind of segues into the next part of what I got going on for today's podcast. I also want to touch on the business side of being a creator, you know?
Yep.
You like you said, you've been in the game for a while. You've sold some work. You've worked with publishers, and now you're kind of going on your own. You're marketing through Facebook or whatever other platforms. How do you see? How has that worked for you? Like, has it been difficult? Has it been easy being able to not only be a creator, but now you have to wear that hat. You have to, where you got to be a marketer. You got to be a business owner, like it's more
Yeah.
than just putting out a project, because now it's a business,
Yeah.
because once you start selling it and making money, like how has marketing become for you, and what platforms have you been using on social media that you found some success on, and when I say success, as far as engagement with the community.
It's been tough.
Hmm.
The one advantage I did have up until about 3 years ago, I had a pretty decent job. I worked in retail. I was a store manager in retail, so I
Okay.
made decent money. I mean, retail you don't make. You're not. I'm not going home and buying my yacht or by
Yeah.
like that. But I
Hmm.
made, and plus I'm single. I don't go out. I don't drink. I don't. My
Yeah.
vices are basically writing my comics. So and I don't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of expenses. So most of my uh, leisure expenses went to creating my comics.
Hmm.
Now I retired a couple of years ago, so now it's gotten a little tighter because Social Security does not pay anywhere near what I was making, before.
Yeah.
Now I'm relying more on those crowdfunders. I need
Okay.
those crowdfunders to help, pay for stuff.
Hmm.
Before basically everything I was paying out of my pocket, and I was
Hmm.
like, I was really up until recently, I was always kind of afraid to do the crowdfunders because I've heard how hard they are and how much, plus when I had a full-time job, I didn't think I could really keep up with, checking it daily and
Yeah.
I was like, I'll just, it's just going to be a wash. So since then I've started, getting into these crowdfunders. But marketing is tough, and I'm learning it as I go.
Hmm.
I'm self-publishing most of my stuff now, but that doesn't
Yeah.
say like when we finish Akemi, I'm going to pitch it to some other publishers. I may pitch it to Ben, see if he does want to
Yeah.
publish it, Antarctica. Or I may go through, I may try Image and Mad Cave and some of the others. I'm not
Yeah.
above working with any publishers,
Hmm.
but I'm not waiting I'm not holding my career back, hoping on the chance that they may like something because
Yeah.
I could sit here for 3 years before they might say, hey, yeah, this is cool, and they
Hmm.
may never say anything. So I'm out there. I'm going to create my comics. I'm going to crowdfund them. I'm going to publish them. Uh, Basically, the best way I've sold comics is through conventions. I
Okay.
do every social media. I do Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, LinkedIn, Instagram. I haven't did
Okay.
TikTok yet because honestly, I'm getting better because I used to not even want to do podcasts because I hate the sound of my voice. I hate me being on camera. It just I
Hmm.
think I look like a big goober and I think I sound terrible. So I've the podcast has helped me, realize I can at least get on them and do them. So now I want to
Yeah.
try to do TikTok because I've heard TikTok is a really good medium to, get your work out there. There's like a whole
Yeah.
comic book community on TikTok from what
Oh
I've been
yeah.
told.
Huge.
And
Huge.
I need to get out there.
Hmm.
First I've got to figure out how to do videos, and so I don't even know how to do the, like create the videos. I did one TikTok, and I basically held my phone up like on the to the camera, and I had like I think it was Akemi, and I just flipped on the computer through the pages, and I just was talking over it. So a
Yeah.
very rudimentary
Yeah.
version of it. So I do
Mm.
any type of social media. I'm gonna be all over it. But I do a lot of conventions. I do
Okay.
and most of them have been local. Surprisingly, for Louisiana, I'm from Louisiana. I'm out about an hour outside of New Orleans. There is
Hmm.
a whole lot of comic book conventions in this state. I've
Okay.
been doing a comic book convention probably every month, if not more.
Okay.
But
All right.
I'm kind of moving away from the local ones because I did all those for like a couple years in a row. Like every month I'd be at and a lot of those conventions attract the same people.
Yeah.
Well, they come in and they go like, "Oh, what you got new?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't written anything. You just seen me
Yeah.
2 months
Same
ago."
thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So now one of the things I found that probably are my best conventions are library cons. A lot of
Okay.
libraries will put on a comic convention, and they're usually free. They don't charge you for a table, and you're attracting some comic book people that will come to them, but you're attracting a lot of people that are just at the library. And
Yeah.
you know one thing, if you're at the library,
You're
you
looking for
probably
something to
like to
read.
read. And I have sold more. I've made more money at library cons, I think, than almost
Wow.
any convention I've been at. And I've attracted, I think, more people that aren't necessarily comic book fans. They'll see some. Because I've had people at the library cons. We had one. Most of them are usually one day, but there's one of them that's a little bigger. That's 2 days. And I
Hmm.
sold some stuff to this one woman. She came back the next day to tell me she read it overnight and really liked it.
Oh
Which is very
wow.
you don't hear that reaction that much because you don't usually see the person again. They buy the
Yeah.
book and they're gone.
Hmm.
And that means a lot when, somebody actually, hey, I like this book or whatever. But so I've been starting to like this year, I've got a convention. I'm doing Staple in
Okay.
I think it's Austin. Where I know I've gotten it written down, so I do know where it is. I'm just not sure. That's an IndieCon. I'm doing a convention in Memphis.
Okay.
Uh, I've got one, I think, coming up in Florida. So within anywhere I can drive within about a 6 to 8 hour window from New Orleans, I can
Hmm.
go to. Now I have
Okay.
did a couple years ago. We did Heroes Con, and that was like a 19-hour drive. That was a
Yeah.
long drive.
I've
It was
I've
a
been to
nice
Heroes
con,
Con.
but it's just I didn't do real well at it because it's everybody there. You got so many big names that it's just
Hmm.
I just don't. I think I kind of got lost in the mix. And I'd
Yeah.
like to do Hero Cons again, but it's kind of expensive. I'd like to do MegaCon, but MegaCon is just so expensive. So I got
Yeah.
to,
I feel like those bigger cons like MegaCon and New York Comic Con and all the major conventions, they're great, but I feel like the big names kind of overshadow
oh yeah,
the indie guy, I mean,
oh
you have
yeah,
a ton of great indie creators there, but I feel like a lot of them get overshadowed by,
oh
you know,
definitely. Well, they have
especially with the pizzazz and everything all the big guys usually have at those conventions.
yeah, and then you also have to worry about like Fan Expo, which used to be WizardCon.
Hmm.
They have a local one. They have one in New Orleans. In fact, I think it's the first convention of the year. They have one in January in New Orleans, and I've always been able to get in for free because they like to bring in some of the local
Yeah.
people to give free tables to. But the problem is those cons, all those big cons that rely on like movie stars and TV
Hmm.
stars
Hmm.
and wrestlers, people are spending too much money on their autographs and to see their pictures that they don't have money left over to
Yeah, to
buy stuff.
go. Yep.
I
Hmm.
do Fan Expo every couple of years, and after I do it, I say I'm not doing it again. I lost money, because
Yeah.
the time because it's downtown, so I have to pay for parking. The New Orleans charges a retailer's fee and all
Hmm.
this, and then I wait a couple of years and I'll go like, well, maybe it'll be different, and it's never different.
It's
It's
always
like
the same.
they
Hmm.
open the doors and usually they have all the artist, I mean the movie stars in the back of the convention. Everybody just
Hmm.
runs past
To the
everyone.
back. Yep. Because of the wait on those lines are
Oh yeah,
hours long. So everybody wants to get there as soon as they can to line up. And like you said, by the time they
yeah.
get their
But,
autographs and their
the autographs
photos,
will cost like $300 an autograph for some of those big names or more. So
yeah. And
those guys
some
don't.
people
You
are
don't have money
getting,
left over.
yeah, some people are getting three, four, five autographs. They just spent almost 2 grand
Yeah,
and now don't have anything else really to go, down to Artist Alley or anything like that to, to explore and see what's down there. That's why I'm the opposite. When I go, especially New York City Comic Con, I go right to Artist Alley.
yeah.
Then I'll go upstairs and I'll go check out all the big guys and all that, say what's up to a bunch of my friends who got booths up there. But I like to go to Artist Alley
Oh
first.
yeah,
That to me, that's my favorite part of a
yeah,
convention. Just, meeting the indie creators and artists and seeing what they got and, just I'm always that's where you'll always find me. Always
yeah,
find me down in that indie space because I mean, I think that's the best part of a convention.
yeah. But
Mhm.
as an indie creator too, it's hard to make especially when I'm traveling out of town. I'm having to get a hotel room,
Yeah.
buy the table, to sell. Mostly what I sell on my table is my comics, five
Yeah.
dollars a pop. To
Yeah.
sell enough $5, a pop, you have
So
to
at
sell a
least
lot of
break even.
comics.
Yeah.
I do sell some T-shirts, which
Hmm.
really has helped. But
Okay.
you got to be careful in T-shirts because you can lose your shirt pardon the pun, in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I don't print up a lot of like I don't do like 100 of a size or something. I print up maybe three or four of a couple different sizes, and
Okay.
and I kind of figure out which ones are selling, and and use those to bring back. And I always look
Hmm.
for like on different sites like Vista Print and some of these
Yeah.
other sites that have sales, and that's when I
Hmm.
buy some T-shirts. When they're
Okay.
selling the T-shirt for like $10, I'll buy maybe 4 or 5 of them, and then I'll turn around and sell it for like $20 or something, and I
Yeah.
make some money on it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So the only problem with that though too is sometimes it's hard to get, when you get a table, you only have so much space. You've got that table in front, and I've got a rack to hold the t-shirts, but it's hard to find a home for it because they won't let me put it in front of the table because I'm blocking the aisle.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's sometimes trying to create my spot. I have to get very inventive, and figure
Yeah.
ways to make where people will come up and look at it. I'm always kind of experimenting with how I display the stuff also,
Hmm.
because I don't want to just okay, there's the books on the table, blah. I'm always looking at different ways to try to attract people to the
Hmm.
table.
Oh yeah. Now, you said you also sell shirts. Do you do the print route? Do you offer any prints? Because my experience, I sell when I'm doing a con. I got my books, and I also have prints. And sometimes I feel like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna sell books, but I feel like the prints move a little faster for me. Like I'll sell a lot more of the posters sometimes.
I've tried prints.
Yeah.
I had one point I had half my table was prints, and I have
Okay.
sucked at prints.
Mm.
So I just don't know why, I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's because I'm not the artist on the print, so maybe they're not as interested in it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I've made some because I've got some of the covers for some of my books that my artists have did are some awesome covers. I
Hmm.
mean, and to me they'd be awesome prints. But they just never have seemed to do that well. And the problem is they take up so much space on my table. At one point, I used to have one of those wire backdrops, one of those
Okay.
metal
Yeah.
backdrops, and I'd hang the
Hmm.
prints from that. But that thing was a pain. One, it was hard to travel, to bring around because it took up so much space in the back of my car when I
Yeah.
already had it packed full of books and everything
Hmm.
else. And then it was such a pain to put up. I just,
And then you gotta break it down.
I
Yeah.
hated that thing. And for if it had made me sell the prints, I'd still be lugging it around. But like I said, I just
Hmm.
some reason I've never sold prints very well.
All right. Okay. All right. Now, being that you have so much experience doing conventions, um, what advice would you have for, the small creator, the new creator looking to, I got a project out. Should I start in the convention scene? Should I wait a little bit till I got more material? When should a creator decide to start hitting that scene?
I I think especially if they've got local conventions to do the
Hmm.
local conventions because they're
Hmm.
less expensive.
Yeah.
Even those though, some of my local conventions are charging as much as for a
Yeah.
table now as some of the bigger conventions.
Yeah.
And in some of the local conventions, if you're a local creator, may give you a table free. I get
Hmm.
some of my local conventions will comp my table. Some of them won't, some will.
Yeah.
I think you've got to first you got to look if you can afford it. Because
Hmm.
tables are expensive. If you start doing cons, a table could cost you anywhere from 150 to $300-400.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
if you only have like I was just saying, if you only have comics and you're selling your comics at $5 a pop or something, you have to sell a lot of those comics to make up for
Yeah, just to break
about making
even.
a profit just to break even.
Yeah.
But I always have been, especially in the beginning, I always looked at it. And part of it helped was because I had a job. I did have,
Hmm.
this wasn't, my only source of income was
Hmm.
I knew I was going to these conventions and was going to lose money. I
Yeah.
knew I wasn't going to make, sell enough books to make back the table and the hotel cost and stuff like that. But,
Hmm.
my idea was I was getting my book out there in front of people. I
Yeah.
was getting people to see the book, and hopefully,
Hmm.
if you just build up on that and you just keep building up. But I think conventions are one of the best ways to get out there and meet people and to get your. Like I said, I do more sales at conventions than I do. I have an online shop. I have I do the crowdfunding. I do all that.
Hmm.
But conventions have still been the best way
You're
I
your
think
best.
to sell
Okay.
comics.
All right.
But you have to look at can you afford to do it? I think
Yeah.
I would realize that you're probably not going to make your money back in the beginning,
No.
unless you've got a comic that, people are just going to be like lined up to buy. You're
Yeah. Which
probably
is
not going to make
very
up
few and
the
far
beginning.
between.
You're not going to make your money for a while, maybe, so
Hmm.
look at it, that that's kind of a lost leader, it's something that, get your name out there, get your books out there. And hopefully if people buy it and then you do a second issue or a different comic, they'll see you at another convention. Oh yeah, I like
Yeah.
the other one. So let me buy this
Hmm.
one. And just slowly it builds up. I've noticed
Yeah.
that, I have people that, the local conventions that come up to me that have bought stuff from me before,
Hmm.
and
Oh
they
yeah.
keep coming back, so it's a slow
Hmm.
process.
Oh yeah, and like you said, is even a local con, even if it's a 10-minute drive from your house,
Yeah,
it's still an investment because like you said, you got to pay for a table if they're not gonna comp you one. You gotta,
yeah.
get your displays, your banners, like it does cost money. So,
Oh yeah,
before you even start to break even off just even your first con, because you want to make sure you got a nice little rack for your comics. You're trying to be as presentable as you can. It
yeah.
costs money. Banners are almost like $100 now, and then
Banners,
racks and all that stuff, man.
tablecloths, racks. Uh,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think about, okay, my comic cost me, 250 to print. So if I sell it for $5, I'm making 250. But then they're not taking into account the banners, the racks, the
Hmm.
tablecloths, the price of
Everything.
the book. I mean, the table, the
Yeah.
gas. When you add all
Hmm.
that up, you're probably
You're
way
probably already in the hole like another
yeah,
dollar or two, and that's what's the emote to me, one of the most important aspects of being an indie creator, like now you got to put the business hat on because it's not
Yeah,
just about creating a project. Now you got to take those things into consideration, especially when you start trying to really shoot your shot and go to big cons. Now you got
yeah.
hotels, because especially if it's a major convention, hotels, the prices are
Oh,
going
oh
way
yeah.
up,
You're
and then
looking
you're
at
gonna be
anywhere
there for
two,
the
three hundred
weekend.
dollars a night,
Yeah.
just to stay at
So
the
you're talking
hotel.
like almost another 2,000 just to
Yeah,
hotel, travel. You got to eat. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And eating at a convention, forget about it. You spending like $50 a day
yeah.
off of like just lunch. Like
Oh yeah,
it gets expensive, and I think that's a one thing a lot of people forget. Like you're just not going to a con and everything is free. It costs the same amount it costs me as it costs for you.
yeah.
Like I don't get a discount because I got a table up here, and
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
and the bigger cons charge even more for a
Oh yeah.
table. You're talking upwards couple thousand for like New York City, MegaCon, and all like the big, big, big
And
major
I
ones.
think MegaCon was $500 a table because I
Mhm.
was looking to go, but then I was adding up on the price. 'Cause I think it's a 5 day convention too, so that's like
Yeah,
basically that's at least 6 days because I'm not traveling back, the night the convention leaves, so that's an
exactly.
extra night. So I'm
Hmm.
looking at that and then looking at the table, and I'm like, I would recommend to people that just starting find the small conventions, find
Yeah.
the library cons, find build it up a little bit. One, you'll get practice being at a table because
Hmm.
you can't just put your books on the table and then just leave them there and sit there and expect people to come up. You have to be
Yeah.
able to talk to people.
You
You
gotta
have to get out there.
engage with
I
with
usually
everyone
stand in
there.
front of my table most times. I don't even sit down. After a convention, I am exhausted because
Hmm.
and it's not physical. It's not like I'm digging ditches or something, but I'm on my feet all day. I'm
Yeah.
talking to people all day. You can't just if you're just on your phone back behind the table scrolling or
You're not
ignoring
gonna
people when they come
you're
up,
not gonna make nothing.
you got to talk. So the smaller conventions, one, you're not competing with the bigger names,
Hmm.
so that helps a lot.
Yeah.
I used to do toy shows, where I might be the only comic book guy there.
Yeah.
Things like that will help. And it gives you a better practice to talk to the people and
Hmm.
to try to sell the book and see what works and what I used to print postcards, and I probably need to get
Okay.
back into it. And I'd have I'd have like on the front, I'd have one of my, I'd have different covers or whatever. On the back, I would have like a QR code that would go to my website. And I would stand in front of the table, or actually, I'd stand in the aisle in front of my table. And as people walk by, I just hand the postcards out to people.
Yeah.
Postcards, you can get them fairly cheap at places like Vista Print. You probably could find them
Hmm.
cheaper than that. Print up a
Hmm.
couple hundred, 1,000, and just hand them. Now,
Damn.
granted,
Yeah.
probably 80% of those postcards are probably going to end up on the floor or in the trash or somewhere.
But
But
that 20% could.
exactly, even if it's 10%,
Mhm.
I do one of the things I do at conventions. I have an 8 page black and white comic. It's featured Marie Laveau, who was the big the voodoo queen in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And it's a little ghost story I wrote. I'm very fascinated by Marie Laveau. But it's just a little 8 page story I created, wrote, had Hernan drew it for me. Uh, we printed it up. I printed it up, and I give that comic away free at conventions. I have
Hmm.
a banner. I give it if you sign up for my email list, you get the comic free. You
Yeah.
know, and I have because I and that's another people need email lists. I
Hmm.
struggled with getting an email list before I started doing this. I'd put a clipboard on the table, and people would come by and say, "Hey, will you sign up for my email list?" And people would be like, "No."
Yeah.
you know,
That's it.
and
That's
now I have a
important.
banner
Getting
that says
those
free
emails.
comic,
Hmm.
and it says Marie Laveau, and especially in this area because Marie Laveau voodoo is real big in South Louisiana, and they
Yeah.
see Marie Laveau, people will come up and be like, "Oh, Marie Laveau, what do you got?" And they're like, "Oh, I want the comic." I said, "Just sign up for my email list,"
Yeah.
and boom, and
And
I've
that's
got
it.
like in the last year, I think I've had 400 people sign up.
And
That
400 emails,
yeah,
that could translate into money. People
yeah,
don't really, a lot of people don't think about that. Like, oh, I'm losing money giving something away for free, but not in reality.
no,
Like you at that moment. if you want to think that way, yes, but think about those 400 emails now you just got.
Yeah,
Out of those 400, you could, that could be a potentially even 100 buyers. That's,
yeah.
and
Well,
if you're selling your comic $5 a pop, do the
yeah,
math right there, like sometimes
yeah,
just getting the email is more valuable than at that moment making a couple of dollars off that product.
yeah. And if you have those emails, like I just sent, I have a Substack, and from that Substack, I just, all my emails go into that Substack. So I
Okay.
just sent all my email people, I just sent about Akemi starting. I said, hey, look, this just dropped. It's on Fund My Comics. Go. So I don't know if it's going to help or not, but at least I know those 400 people liked my comic or wanted my comic enough to, the free comic, to sign up for the email. So hopefully some of those people like what I wrote and,
Yeah.
or, will go to it. But that
Yeah.
gives you a chance to communicate with people that, are interested enough to sign up for your email. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't, I don't send any more than really, I don't send any more probably than every 2 weeks. I've been really bad about sending my emails out. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be sending emails out like every day or something. But
Mm-hmm.
if you send one out once a week, I don't think that's that bad. And it gets you at least, communicating, and it lets the people that signed up for it, know you're still out there.
Yeah,
And that's
because a lot of people forget from signing up like a week or two ago, and then,
yeah,
they're not thinking about when they signed up for whatever they did at a convention, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember he's got
oh yeah,
that comic I read was pretty great. Let me see. Oh, he's got a Kickstarter or
yeah,
some sort of a project coming out. Let me
yeah,
follow that. Let me click and follow, and
yeah,
that's where the business comes in,
yeah. Yeah.
hmm
And I would have like, I've tried, I used to have a website. I probably had a Patreon. I don't know if it was out there that to have, I had it at one time. But
Okay.
they just never seemed to do anything. So right
hmm
now I have a Substack, and my Substack
Okay.
seems to be doing the best of anything.
Yeah.
One, you got to have something and you got to be consistent with it. I had a website for a while, then I dropped it. So,
Yeah.
you can't keep you. I'm a very bad example of what not to do. As far as I think you need something, and then like my Substack. I usually contribute. I usually write something on the Substack minimum once a week, sometimes every day.
Okay.
And it's not just comic related. Most of it is comic related. 90% of it's comic related. But I also write about like writing comics. I've written like three little books about
Okay.
comics, like creating comics. I wrote Alma the script, which is basically the script for the first issue of Alma. It's got
hmm
my handwriting, my
Yeah.
handwritten script, plus the script. Because people are always asking, what does a script look like? How do I write a comic? Um, so on my Substack, I have all this stuff. In fact, uh, I've lived in the New Orleans area, for a long time. I was here for
Yeah.
Katrina. I just wrote like 12 posts. I used to have a blog back when Katrina came through, and I
hmm
actually wrote on the blog every day with what was happening.
hmm
So basically, I just took all those blog pieces, updated them and added stuff to them, and I just posted that on my Substack. So my
Yeah.
Substack gives me a chance to write a lot about a lot of different things,
hmm
and to keep my comics in the front, and
Yeah.
it gives the readers, or people, hopefully my fans, someplace to find where
hmm
they can find my stuff, and they can find
Yeah.
what's coming up, and hopefully I like I said, I write a lot of stuff about creating comics. I'm really bad about showing this stuff on the. Let me see if this. Can you see this?
I could, yeah, I could see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my book about creating comics.
That's
This is just
awesome.
this is
That's
just
awesome.
basically the act of creation. Then I've
That's
got
awesome because this, you especially for the newcomer coming in to this game, there's so many questions, and sometimes it's hard to find. I'm not gonna say you're gonna find the right answer because everything, everyone's experience is different. But
exactly
at
yeah,
least with, tools like that, and I'm hoping, especially with this podcast that I'm doing, could give the indie creator and outside of comics, anything, at least a foundation
yeah,
where to start and how to, how to put pieces together. Like, oh, you know what? This worked for this creator, that worked for that creator, and let me try to start throwing all these spices and into the pot and see what works. Because a lot of this too is also it's hit or miss. It's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of hit or miss, a
oh
lot
yeah.
of hit or miss,
Well,
and
you know,
that's a great idea that you're doing.
when I first got into comics, I would have killed for some of this because I'm not a big name. I don't expect people to think, oh, he knows that. But like everything I'm writing about is from my point of view,
Yeah,
what's worked and what hasn't worked for me. And like you said,
yeah,
it gives people an idea and maybe, okay, maybe this will work. See, this one is about Alma the script.
yeah.
And this is basically, like I said, just I write in longhand when I write before I,
Hmm.
put it in the computer. So in here, I actually have first I put a copy of the longhand, the script where I hand wrote
Yeah.
it, where you can see all my scratches. And, I
Hmm.
might have said, oh, let me write this down here. It's like sometimes it's like a big map of stuff. And
Yeah.
then on the page opposite it, I wrote the finished script, typewritten. So it gives people an idea of, okay, this is one way you can write a script. There's no right or wrong way. A
Yeah.
lot of people do, scripts all different ways. But this
Hmm.
gives people at least, this is some way I can do, maybe I never would have thought of this before. So
Hmm.
I like to just, like I said, when I first started, I would have killed to have, you know,
Hmm.
just little tips and ideas about how, people were creating comics. So
Oh
I
yeah.
figured, maybe they'll read it and it'll be like, oh no, that's stuff I don't want to do. But then at least it helped them to, determine what to do or not to do.
Oh, absolutely. That
Yeah.
is an amazing idea. Now, do you sell that or is that
Yes.
something?
No, I sell. A lot of it's on my Substack that you can read for free, but I
Okay.
do sell them at conventions too. I've printed them up. They're all digest size, and I bring them to conventions with me too. So
Nice.
I get a lot of people come up and sometimes it's the parents, especially like the library cons. The mom will come up and say, oh my daughter or my son wants to write comics, or they want to create comics. Do you have
Hmm.
any advice? And I'm like, well, not to be mercenary about it, but I do have these things I've worked
Yeah.
on that kind of give you some ideas, and they may get some thoughts about it,
Hmm.
from many of these books. So
Yeah. Tools like that, I feel are very essential, because
yeah,
like I said, you could Google whatever questions you have all day. You're gonna come up with a trillion different answers,
yeah,
and a lot of it is just seeing what really works, and especially talking to a fellow indie creator, whether they have a year or two of experience or 20, like what works and what doesn't. It's all
yeah.
what works for me may not work for you, but it's good to have an idea,
Yeah.
and where to start from, because
Or even if
only
it
you can make it better.
yeah, even if it doesn't work for you, you may read it and say, okay, I don't want to go that route. Because I've read, books like, how-to books,
Yeah.
and I'll be like, no, that doesn't make sense for me.
Hmm.
But it kind of like, okay, now I know not to go down that route. I
Yeah.
know that's not the
Hmm.
way to go.
Saves you time.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Like I said, when I first started, there was no books like, I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays you can find a lot more information, but it's still sometimes, it's hard for people to, it's like, the book I wrote about creating comics, basically, I just put in there like how my idea, like how I went from like when I got that idea of a book story to develop this idea, and then just every step of the way, where I moved, until I got to the finished page,
Yeah.
because that's one of the biggest questions you get, well, how do you create a comic, or how do you get
Hmm.
ideas? And it's like ideas are everywhere. I
Yeah.
get a lot of ideas. Sometimes I'll just go to drive. I like, maybe just drive for an hour, go somewhere and then turn
Hmm.
around and come back. And
Yeah.
especially
Just
when
let
I'm
your
kind of like
mind
stuck on
open.
an idea,
Hmm.
I will say, I need to go drive. And,
Hmm.
I play it over and over in my mind. And then, a lot of times I'll get that, worked out and
Yeah.
boom, I'll come back and I know what to do with it.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
ideas
Sometimes you
come from
just need to
everywhere.
clear your mind, and sometimes we lose focus in life, the
Yeah.
everyday, just we just lose focus on the everyday, and we just need to sometimes just, like you said, even if it's to go for a drive for an hour, go for a walk, you
Yeah.
kind of like shut your brain off from the everyday, and just
Yeah.
kind of just like let that open and just absorb
Yeah.
what
Whatever
what you
works.
got in your
Yeah.
head. Yeah.
Whatever works
Hmm.
best for you. Maybe going sitting on your porch, and just sitting there,
Something.
light work,
Hmm. Just get
maybe
in
like you
that
said, taking a
relaxing
walk,
space. Hmm.
whatever works best for you. But ideas are a dime a dozen. You can get
Yeah,
an idea from anywhere. When I
anywhere.
created Alma, I got that idea from Facebook. There's some Facebook group where they made them, and I don't remember what the group was. Somebody made a comment about how, why is it that, in the fantasy quest that the hero was always the big strapping young male?
Yeah.
Why can't it be somebody's grandma?
Yeah.
Everybody in the
Exactly.
everybody, treated that as a joke. All the comments were like, oh, ha 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 ha. But to me,
Hmm.
my mind went like, boom, what if that
Yeah,
was true? And
exactly. And I think the
there's a throwaway
curiosity
idea.
would bring people to engage with it more because like you said, it's not the usual strapping, strong
Yeah,
person. It's a little old lady, and it's like, all right, you know what? That's a different twist. Now I'm curious. It's all
yeah.
about, I feel like it's just sparking that
Yeah.
curiosity,
But idea, like I said though, ideas, who would have thought that would have, launched, made me think about that. But
Yeah.
ideas can come from anything. Reading something, a TV show, you might see something like, you don't realize, and you just keep moving off that idea. You take that idea and then you go like, well, what if this? Or what if that? And
Yeah.
it may not, it may start off here, but it may end up way over here because I I know a lot of writers outline when they write. A lot of writers like they'll have the whole outline for the book, and this is going
Hmm.
to happen, this is going to happen. This I can't do that. I
Yeah.
start off with a general idea, and a lot of times I'll have kind of an idea of where it's going to end. But
Yeah.
where
I'm the
from to
same.
get from here to here is and working on like the second issue of Akemi right now. I wrote up to about page 10, and then I was kind of like, all right, I know where I'm going. But then I was like, I took a drive and I was driving around and I was like, no, this is what I need to do. So
Yeah.
things change from,
Hmm.
even, from where I thought, like today, I might think, okay, this is going to happen. I'll do it tomorrow. By the time tomorrow gets around, it's kind of twisted around in my mind. And I'm like, I like that idea of the freedom to, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, even if you write an outline, you still have the opportunity. You can change it.
Yeah. Nothing's
To me,
set in stone till you get it printed.
yeah. But to me, I like being that, okay, this is where I'm going. I don't, very few of my stories if I ever knew step by step how it was going to go. It's like
Yeah.
as I go, it's like I may be 4 or 5 pages in, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, I'll turn right instead of left,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden I'm doing, it's changed the whole concept of the
Yeah.
story, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm the same way. Like, I kind of have an idea of where this is headed, and then I'll start to like dig into it and write it and rewrite it and then it's like sometimes, the route you have
Yes.
that you had, it's a little different. You know what I'm saying? So you gotta turn left a little bit, and eventually, come back to how you wanted it to, because sometimes it just
Yeah.
doesn't work in that way,
Yeah. I think
especially writing a
you gotta
comic
be
book.
willing to give yourself the freedom to, like, even if you outline something, you have to be giving yourself the freedom that if you don't think, or you have a better idea, that just because this is how you thought it was going to go, well, maybe you should do this instead. You can
Yeah,
always go back to
absolutely.
your outline. You
Hmm.
can always go back to it, but to me, it's like it's kind of a cliche that you talk about, like, oh, the characters kind of take a life of their own, but they kind of do. You kind of, as you're writing them, you think, oh no, this is what they should do, not what I thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
It feels better for them to do this. So
Hmm.
that's cliches are cliches because there's an element of truth in them.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, and that helps. I mean, that's helped me a lot, just to give myself that freedom to write wherever I want to
Hmm.
go, and not worry about, well, is it going,
Hmm.
how is it going to go, or maybe this is too, because I'm good at putting some like absurdity in my comics too. I'm a big Steve Gerber fan. I don't know if you're familiar. He's the guy that created Howard the Duck,
Hmm.
and he wrote the Defenders, and he was like a comic book writer, and mainly for Marvel, like in the '70s. He's like one of my biggest influences, and
Okay.
his style, like, well, just creating Howard the Duck, his style was very, out there, and
Hmm.
I like to, as I'm writing stuff, even serious stuff, I'll be like, okay, what if we did this? That people are going to think, well, that's crazy. But sometimes that adds to it,
Sometimes
that
that
makes it,
craziness is good crazy,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
works. It works in your favor.
yeah.
Now, my next question is, um, have you ever approach like local comic shops, to or even the online retailers to try to get your book out there? Because I think that's kind of like what we would all like to do eventually is get our stuff on the shelves somewhere,
Yes.
and be, have that much engagement like Marvel or DC and have just seeing your book next to like Iron Man or the new Batman, like have
Oh
you
yeah.
ever tried going that route? And if you have, you know, did it work out for you? Any success there? Like, how did you approach, you know,
Yes and
these
no.
local shops?
I have like there is one local shop that like has a whole section devoted to local creators. And
Hmm.
even other shops like I've there's a few that I've contacted through online one way or another that basically we worked at like, okay, I'll send you a few comics like on spec, you sell
Yeah.
them, you send me some money back. I'm actually talking to, and I need to get part of the problem is I'm actually talking to oh, my mind just went blank. One of the, how since Diamond has uh Philbo Distributors,
Hmm.
I talked to him in San Diego and I showed him some of my books, and he basically was like, "Yeah, I'll distribute these." But
Okay.
the thing is, I've got to get. I've been really bad about having barcodes on my comics because I've always been selling conventions and local.
Hmm.
Like I said, I do some of the stores, and I really haven't made any money on that. It's
Yeah.
cool to have them in the stores, but most stores want a barcode on it. So I
Yeah.
just actually have got Akemi one will have a barcode on the back of it.
Hmm.
So I need to, that was one of the things I've got to get because Philbo, if I go through a distributor, they want barcodes on it. So I just ordered a whole bunch of barcodes, and you can get them
Hmm.
with like the sticker where you can, you don't have to print them. So some of
Hmm.
these other books I've got like a girl and her dog and stuff that I've got copies
Hmm.
of. I'm going to try to go through Philbo because he distributes to through most of the comic shops.
That's what's up. Yeah, because in my approach, I've never I've never done a Kickstarter campaign. Never. I was always afraid of Kickstarter campaigns, like
That
because
was
I
me.
feel like, if it doesn't meet its goal, I feel like, damn, is this a horrible project? You know what I'm saying? So I've
Yeah,
always went straight to consumer. I've had my website. I've also been fortunate enough to have supporters like, from the online resellers like, Steve McDonald from Clan McDonald's Comics, Sean Dushko from Comics Elite. I was lucky to have those supporters to help push my books to where I was, I gained a little success. So I think I am gonna put out a Kickstarter soon. This is gonna be my first one. Like I said, I'm very nervous about
oh,
that,
I
but
was, yeah, like I said, it took me a while to, go the Kickstarter route because
mhm,
I was scared to do it. It's
yeah,
very intimidating.
and I also like to put everything together first. Like I want to have everything ready to go, so I'm not if the campaign doesn't meet its goal, I'm not, it's not like it's gonna stop me from,
Yes,
oh, well,
yeah,
now I can't get the artwork done because I ain't got no money. I already have the project, so now I just gotta print it up myself,
yeah.
and just go my route. So I've always been kind of kind of nervous about that. And is Akimi your first crowdfunding project, or
I've
or
did
you've
it.
done it before,
I did it twice before.
and you've went through Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, the first two times through Kickstarter,
What
uh,
made you change your mind on using a different
just
crowdfunding
just to see
of
how the other
source?
ones would do. And like I said, I still plan on doing Kickstarter coming up with the Two Tons versus Cthulhu. That's going to be a Kickstarter. But I wanted because I've read about Fund My Comics and I've read
Hmm.
about Zoop. Now I know neither of those have that same backing that Kickstarter has,
Hmm.
but they're more like Fund My Comics is basically just comic books.
Yeah,
They're not a crowdfunding site that
everything
sells
on there. Hmm.
everything in the world, so
Hmm.
they may not have the reach that Kickstarter does, but I'm
But their
hoping
audience is
is more,
strictly
yeah,
comics, so
exactly.
people on there are looking for comics to
Yeah.
back. So
So we're going to
that's a
see.
good thing.
like you said, I'm already, even if Akemi does not uh, fund, it'll be done. It's
Yeah.
done. I'm actually
Hmm.
printing 100 copies of it in the next. I just sent it out to get it formatted, and once I get it in, I'm sending it to the printer. So I'm going to have copies of it even without the Kickstarter or the fund. The go fund my comic.
Yeah.
That's not going to stop me from printing the book. So
Yeah.
uh, so I just wanted to try some of the other routes and see if they work or not. Like fund my comic, I've seen people. I was kind of looking through it. I've seen some people didn't make their goal, and then I've seen other people made like
Mm.
40, $50,000.
Yeah. Oh
So it's
yeah.
just like like I said, the thing is, Kickstarter has almost become its own. People that I think a lot of people that buy on Kickstarter don't ever even go to a comic book store. They scroll through Kickstarter and they just buy their comics through Kickstarter.
Mm.
There's a whole you know organization or a whole crowd of people I think that live on Kickstarter now. It's created its own
Yeah. Yeah. I
life. I
think
think.
everything goes now. I think most, and not just, comic creators, or I think most people that are putting out a project now
Yeah,
are going the Kickstarter
a
route,
lot. Yeah,
whether it's
definitely.
a new microwave or something. Like everyone is going through Kickstarter, and that's why when I see someone go a different route, I even seen someone do a GoFundMe for a comic, and I was like, now
Wow.
I've never seen that, you
No, I
know?
thought about that until I kind of researched GoFundMe a little bit more and realized GoFundMe is more for helping people.
Yeah, that's why I was like, because that's what I'm used to. That's what I'm familiar with GoFundMe being for is, help, for donations and,
Exactly.
helping
Yeah.
out, but I never seen it used to crowdfund a project
No,
before.
no.
I mean, I don't know what's the success rate behind that, but I mean, I'm pretty sure it's got to be pretty decent. I mean, crowdfunding, whether it's here or there, it's all essentially the same kind of deal.
Yeah.
In some aspect.
Yeah. Now I did try to do what I'm doing through Zoop is the digital library. And I actually did
Yeah.
do that through there's a company out of Australia called Comics with an X,
Uh-huh.
and they're doing like online. And I kind of hooked up with them when they first started, and they tried to do a crowdfunding uh, site about a year or two ago, and I
Hmm.
tried to do that through them, and it didn't really work out too well. And I think mainly it's because nobody's really knew about them. I
Yeah.
mean, like Kickstarter has people. Even with all your ads you put out and stuff like that, Kickstarter has people that just scroll through it and go like, "Boom, I like that."
Yeah, like, oh,
I
that
think
looks
Fund
great.
My Comic does that too. They've got people that they just look through it and say, "Oh, I never heard of this, but I like this idea."
Yeah.
So I think that has a lot, to help with it too. I mean, I think you still have to get out there and beat the bushes and try to sell the book yourself. But
Hmm.
you know, but I think they also have a built-in audience that
Yeah.
if they're attracted to it, will get
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah, I feel like from what I've seen, like their audience is tailored more
exactly, yes.
to the comic book fan, because especially those that support indie comics, because you've got a lot of uh people that are fans of comic books that just don't like indie. They just, they like the
Oh
majors, they
yeah.
like the DCs and the Marvels, and they're not really into the indies. But I feel like that's where a lot of the best stories come from, and not just comics. I've said this time and time again. I feel like the indie scene, whether it's comics, movies, you've got a ton of great independent
Oh yeah.
films, music. Because I just feel like there's more freedom of creativity here. Like you can do
Yeah.
what you want to do. You're not really listening to you don't have to kind of abide by the big machines,
Yeah.
what they want you to put out. Because when you're tied to them, you got to put out what they want you to put
Oh
out.
yeah. You've got
And it
people
may not
telling you,
be
no, you
something
can't do that or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, like you can't even, and a lot of times you're kind of tied. Your hands are tied behind your back because you can't even really work on your own kind of
Yeah.
projects, which I feel like the indie scene is it's always gonna be here as long as we keep pumping out great great products, and we're always. I feel like eventually, because my opinion, and a lot of people probably gonna not say that I'm wrong. I feel like the major players, they're just putting out a lot of same old nonsense. You got a lot of great stories, but I feel like a lot of the stuff they're pumping down our throats is just repeated stuff, and eventually that's just gonna fall flat. And I feel
Oh
like the indie scene will always be there to save that whatever that industry is,
yeah, yeah,
you know, and I feel like a lot of the big companies on any kind of media platform should really start investing their time into looking into the indie scene, because it's very hard for an independent creator to even pitch your products to
oh yeah,
any major company, like especially with music. Like they won't even you can't solicit your stuff. They won't even touch it, like
yeah.
I feel like they need to open their doors up more
Oh, yeah. Well, even
to the
honestly,
indie creator.
the comic book publishers are like that now too.
Yeah,
Very few of them will want to talk to you. Will
yeah,
want to take the meeting even. So it's rough. To
yeah,
try to break in. And to move into something else.
yeah,
I spent I've been to San Diego the last 2 years, and it's mainly just to like try to network. And
yeah,
I'm going again this year, and it's just mainly to try to get meetings and talk to people and things like that because it's I'm not getting a table out there, but it's just one to go because it's a really cool convention,
yeah. Hmm.
but it's most my main thought is I want to before a couple months before the convention I start emailing people, hey, I'll be out there, can you meet, and it's worked a little bit and it hasn't worked a little bit.
Yeah,
I've had a
yeah,
few good meetings and but a lot of them will be a lot. I'm lucky when they even answer me back. A lot of
hmm
them just don't even reply back and say,
yeah,
hey, no, we're not going to meet or whatever. But
yeah.
so
Hmm. All right, and before we wrap up, I always like to kind of end each interview with you know, what kind of advice would you have to the upcoming creator, you know, try to break into this market, or they're kind of stuck somewhere, especially, you've got a huge library. You've got tons of experience, so I'm pretty sure like you definitely have some gems to kind of provide to the community.
I think the biggest thing, and I know it's probably the hardest thing too, is just don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, and I could sit here and say that, but it's I've gotten discouraged before.
Hmm.
It's hard, when you're working on something and things don't work out right. Uh, but I wouldn't start your first comic book number one of a 25 issue series or something. Try to start off small. Try to start off like a single issue of something. If they, and I look at it too, I'm always working on like probably 5 or 6 different projects at one time. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And especially like if you're working on it and you just can't finish it, move over to the next project and try to see what happens with that. Maybe that's the project you want to end up working with, not the one, that you got stuck with, but just you have to be positive and just
Yeah.
keep at it. Start small, like I said, start small conventions, start, getting on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky, whichever one I know, all these social medias, there's some of them that people just hate,
Hmm.
and I agree, a lot of them they're toxic, but I use
Yeah.
them for what I use them for, but they're also the
Absolutely.
best way to connect with people, and just
Hmm.
start
Just get
sending
out
your
there.
stuff out, send it
Yeah.
to people and let them see what they like about it, and don't take criticism, to heart. It's
Yeah. You
hard when
can't.
somebody says, "Oh, that sucks," and you
Hmm.
think, "Oh, that's," everybody's got different tastes. What I like,
Exactly.
you may not like.
Hmm.
What you like, this other guy may not like. That doesn't
Agreed.
mean your work sucks. It just means
Yeah.
that
It's
person
just not
doesn't
for
like
that
it.
person. Yeah.
But if they can give you, you know, real criticism and say, "Hey, I didn't like this because this is what happened." Listen to the criticism. And you don't not necessarily have to, to act on it, but maybe there is something that
Yeah.
you missed that they can help you with. You should
Hmm.
look at it all And you take it for what it is. It's somebody telling you, and it may be worth nothing, but then maybe what they said is something that
Makes
might
sense.
help
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
But either way, it's hard. And that's the hardest thing is when people will criticize something and go like, oh, that's terrible. And you just want to crawl in a hole and pull a rock behind you. But
Oh
you just
yeah.
it's in this type of business, you've got to have a thick skin. You've got to, be able to just, move on to the next project. If something doesn't work, just move to the next project then. Okay, that
Hmm.
didn't work out. Let me try something else.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
to me, it's just, it's just
Sticking to your guns, you
exactly,
know?
yeah. And
Hmm.
just
I agree.
trying, I wouldn't start off with like, I'm going to write, a 25 issue epic and I'm going to go to San Diego and sell it.
Yeah, no,
Start off
that's
small, start off with the small conventions and,
hmm
start off going through social media and, just build your way up. Start off doing Kickstarter or Fund My
hmm
Comics or Zoop or whatever. And,
absolutely.
and when, if you go to Kickstarter, I wouldn't, I'm uncomfortable with Akemi. I asked for $1,000 and I'm worried about that. But put a low, as low as you can afford. If you're
Yeah.
trying to pay back what you may put into the comic, but don't ask for $20,000 on your first Kickstarter.
Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah,
would
there's
love for it to
people.
get that high.
Yeah, there's people that made $100,000 on Kickstarter, but they're like
Oh
a
yeah.
Terry Moore or people like that.
Hmm.
Start off with what you're going to make because you don't get that money on Kickstarter if you don't make your goal.
Yeah, nope, you've got to
Start off with
reach your
five hundred
goal.
dollars, and if you make it, then you got $500 you didn't have before. You start off and
Exactly.
ask for $10,000 and you don't make it, you ain't got anything.
Yeah, exactly. And then I feel like that'll be harder for someone to want to back you because they're like, well, they've got a sales goal of 10,000 and it's their first issue.
Yeah,
Like I don't see this hitting 10,000. We're like 2 weeks out and they've only got like 20%
yeah,
back. Yeah,
yeah, and
it's
other people are just not gonna back it because they're gonna know, okay, you got to be realistic on
hmm
what setting your sights.
Yeah.
That's something too, kind of going a little back to, like when I'm working with creators and I'm looking for creators, like, when I just looked for people for Akemi, you know, don't sell yourself short, but also don't ask for, Marvel and DC, levels of money when you're not a Marvel or DC level talent.
Yeah.
I get a lot of artists, and I always, I work with the artists that their their budget can meet my budget.
Yeah.
If they want more, that's fine. We'll just part ways. That's great.
Exactly.
I
Mhm.
don't ever try to talk somebody down or if they say, hey, my budget is this, and I say, well, I can only afford that, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say, well, dude, let's work on this, but I have some people that are, and you can tell they're newbies. They're people that have really haven't did that much, and they're asking like $300 a page for their art. And
Yeah.
you look at their art, it's nowhere near the professional
hmm
level that
Yeah.
that it should be, especially for that level of, and it's,
Yeah,
I'm not
especially,
saying price it at $10 a page, but you gotta know what you're worth,
what,
and
yeah, exactly. Especially starting out and things
yeah,
like that, because it's not easy work. I mean, I'm not an artist, but I've worked with artists
yeah,
and it's not easy work. You know what I'm saying?
no,
Like,
and
they
it takes, I can write a script in a day. An artist that might take 2 months to draw that script.
exactly.
So yeah, I understand from what they're coming from, and and I don't ever want somebody to undersell themselves, but I think sometimes there's also that they oversell themselves and think, oh,
Hmm.
I heard that, I can't even think of a big name artist right now, but I heard, George Perez makes, $400 a page or something. Well, you're not George Perez,
Yeah, yeah, and you're
and
gonna want to
especially
spend that for the
if you're
name,
starting out, you need to be able to meet, the beginning writer, so y'all can both get something done, and
and get your name out there as an
yeah,
artist and then build that repertoire where now you could charge 100 $200 a page and the
yeah,
value's there because it's not just your art is great, but you also got to have the name too. You're like, oh,
yeah,
this such and such drew this, oh, it's gonna be
oh
great.
yeah,
I absolutely, I'm gonna definitely buy it,
yeah,
just off the value of of the creator's name. But yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like the advice you gave was great, and those were some great gems. But on that note, John, I want to thank you for giving giving this new podcast an opportunity, to not only just talk about your projects, but learn a little more about who you are as a creator. And I want everyone to, don't forget to check out his new project, Akemi. It's gonna be on Fund My Comics. The links are gonna be below and all that good stuff as usual. And we hope to see you again on the future episode when when you got some more stuff lined up and we could bless the world with that as well.
Oh yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I'm glad to be part of a new podcast. And like I said, I've got a lot of stuff lined up. I've got a Zoom coming up. I've got a
Mhm.
Kickstarter coming up. So I may be reaching out to you a
I'll
lot.
be here. Can't wait. Can't wait. And on that note, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.